Life in Maotian was a place of warmth. Sun-drenched valleys were filled with bustling markets and joyful laughter. Madam Tsang always called it home. She loved its vibrant culture and the kindness of its people. Life was peaceful. Yet Madam Tsang yearned for something more. She felt a pull towards the unknown. One day, a traveling merchant arrived from the north. He spoke of a land called Rakhilah. It was a place of snow and ice. The merchant described majestic mountains and a city carved from ice itself, Mardishan. Madam Tsang was captivated. She had to see this for herself. Her family was worried. They had heard tales of the unforgiving north. Blizzards could swallow you whole. Temperatures could freeze you solid. But Madam Tsang was resolute. She would not be swayed. This journey was her calling. She would prove that she was strong enough. Madam Tsang began preparing for her adventure. She gathered warm clothes and supplies. Saying goodbye to her family was hard. They feared they might never see her again. With tears in her eyes, Madam Tsang promised to return. She set off towards the north. In her heart, she carried the warmth of Maotian and the burning desire to experience the icy embrace of Rakhilah. Madam Tsang knew her journey would be long and difficult. She needed the right equipment to survive the harsh conditions of the north. She sought out the finest artisans in Maotian. They crafted warm clothes from yak wool and sturdy boots from toughened leather. She visited the village elder. He was wise and knowledgeable about the world. He gifted her a compass. It would guide her through the snowy wilderness. He also shared stories of Rakhilah. He emphasized the importance of respecting the land and its people. Saying goodbye to her family was the hardest part. Her children clung to her. They didn't want her to leave. Her husband held her close. He promised to wait for her return. With a heavy heart, Madam Tsang reassured them. She would be careful. She would come back to them. As she walked away from her home, she turned back one last time. She saw her family waving. They were a beacon of warmth and love. This memory would fuel her determination. She would complete this journey. She would make them proud. The journey north was arduous. Madam Tsang crossed treacherous mountain passes. The air grew thin. Breathing became a challenge. She persevered. She had to keep going. The icy plains of Rakhilah awaited. She encountered nomadic tribes who lived in harmony with nature. They taught her how to navigate by the stars. They shared their food and stories. These encounters reinforced Madam Tsang's belief in the kindness of strangers. It was a valuable lesson for her journey ahead. At times, fierce snowstorms engulfed her path. The wind howled like a banshee. Visibility reduced to mere feet. Madam Tsang huddled in her tent. She waited patiently for the storm to pass. These moments tested her resolve, but she remembered her promise. She would not give up. After weeks of travel, she saw it in the distance. A shimmering city rose from the frozen plains. The sun glinted off its icy structures. This was Mardishan, the city of ice. A wave of accomplishment washed over her. She had faced the challenges. She had reached her destination. Her adventure was just beginning. Stepping into Mardishan was like entering another world. Buildings were carved from ice. Intricate sculptures lined the streets. The air was crisp and clean. Her breath formed clouds of frost. Everything was different from the warmth of Maotian. Yet there was a strange beauty to it. The people of Mardishan were bundled in thick furs. They were a hardy people accustomed to the cold. They stared at Madam Tsang, intrigued by her foreign appearance. She smiled, eager to learn about their way of life. The cold was harsh. It seeped into her bones. She struggled to adjust. The locals taught her how to survive. They showed her how to build fires for warmth. They shared their traditional food, dried meats and hearty stews. Their kindness warmed her as much as the fire. Madam Tsang learned a new respect for the environment. She saw how the people of Mardishan lived in harmony with the cold. They didn't just survive, they thrived. This land, so different from her own, held a unique kind of magic. It captivated her spirit and fueled her desire to learn more. Section 5, A City of Ice and Stone. Exploring Mardishan and befriending the locals. Days turned into weeks as Madam Tsang explored Mardishan. She marveled at the ice sculptures. They glittered under the pale sun. Each one told a story. She listened intently as local children explained their meaning. Their laughter echoed through the frozen streets. She learned about their traditions. They celebrated the winter solstice with a festival of lights. Ice lanterns illuminated the city. Their beauty took her breath away. She participated in their ice fishing expeditions. It was a test of patience and skill. Madam Tsang made friends with a kind woman named Annika. Annika taught her the art of sewing with furs. She shared stories of her life in Mardishan. Their friendship blossomed despite the language barrier. They communicated through gestures and laughter. Life in Mardishan was challenging but rewarding. Madam Tsang learned to adapt. She embraced the cold and the culture. The people of Mardishan welcomed her with open arms. She was no longer a stranger. She was a part of their community. Yet, there was one more place she longed to see, Nunavutya. Section 6. The Lure of the Edge. Learning about Nunavutya and the perils of Land's End. Stories of a place called Nunavutya captivated Madam Tsang. It lay beyond Mardishan at the very edge of the world. People called it Land's End. It was a desolate yet beautiful land of ice floes and towering glaciers. Annika's grandfather, a seasoned explorer, told tales of Nunavutya. He described polar bears stalking the ice floes and the magical aurora borealis painting the night sky. He spoke of its beauty but also its danger. He warned of unpredictable blizzards and treacherous ice crevasses. Only the bravest and most skilled ventured to Nunavutya. Madam Tsang was determined to see this place for herself. It called to her adventurous spirit. Annika's grandfather agreed to guide her, but first, she had to prove herself. She had to undergo tests of strength and endurance. Only then would she be ready for the perilous journey to Land's End. Section 7. Proving her mettle, undergoing tests of strength and endurance. Annika's grandfather didn't take his role as a guide lightly. He devised a series of tests for Madam Tsang. He needed to be sure she could handle the challenges of Nunavutya. The first test was ice fishing. She had to catch a fish with her bare hands. The icy water numbed her hands, yet she persisted. After hours of trying, she emerged from the lake triumphant, with a fish in hand. The next test involved navigating a treacherous ice maze. The winding paths were disorienting. The biting wind threatened to knock her off her feet. Madam Tsang used her compass and her instincts. She remembered the lessons from the nomadic tribe. After hours of searching, she found her way out. The final test was a race against Annika. They had to pull a sled laden with ice blocks across a frozen lake. Their muscles screamed in protest, but they pushed themselves to the limit. In the end, they crossed the finish line together. Annika's grandfather nodded in approval. Madam Tsang had proven herself. She was ready for Nunavutya. Section 8. Journey to the Edge of the World. The trek from Mardishan to Nunavutya. The journey from Mardishan to Nunavutya was unlike anything Madam Tsang could have imagined. They traveled on sleds pulled by huskies. The dogs were powerful and intelligent. Their breath formed clouds of frost in the freezing air. They crossed vast, desolate landscapes. The only signs of life were the occasional polar bear tracks in the snow. The silence was deafening. It was broken only by the crunching of snow under the sled's runners and the occasional howl of the wind. At night, they huddled in their tents. They warmed themselves with small fires and shared stories. The aurora borealis danced across the sky. It painted the snow with vibrant hues of green, blue, and purple. It was a magical sight that filled Madam Tsang with awe. The journey was fraught with danger. They encountered hidden crevasses and had to navigate around them carefully. One day, a blizzard struck without warning. Visibility reduced to almost nothing. The wind howled fiercely, threatening to tear them apart. Section 9. A World of Ice and Snow. Experiencing the harsh beauty of Nunavutya. After weeks of arduous travel, they finally reached Nunavutya. It was more breathtaking than Madam Tsang could have imagined. Towering glaciers rose from the frozen sea. Icebergs of all shapes and sizes drifted silently by. It was a world of pristine white, a stark contrast to the colorful world she knew. They set up camp near a towering glacier. Its icy surface shimmered under the pale sun. Madam Tsang felt dwarfed by the sheer scale and grandeur of her surroundings. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. One day they spotted a polar bear and her cubs. The majestic creatures moved gracefully across the ice floes. They watched from a distance, respecting the animal's space. It was a privilege to witness these creatures in their natural habitat. At night, the aurora borealis returned. It painted the sky with an even more spectacular display than before. It was as if the heavens themselves were celebrating Madam Tsang's arrival at Land's End. She stood there, mesmerized, until the first rays of dawn began to touch the horizon. Section 10. Farewell to the Frozen North. The journey home and the warmth of Mautien. It was time for Madam Tsang to return home. She had seen the wonders of Nunavutya. She had faced her fears and emerged stronger. The journey back to Mardishen was bittersweet. She was leaving a place she had come to respect and admire. Annika and her family bid farewell. They had become like family to her. They exchanged gifts and promises to stay in touch. Leaving Mardishen was like saying goodbye to a part of herself. But she knew she carried the spirit of the North within her. The journey back to Maotien was arduous, but her heart was lighter. She carried the memories of her adventures. She had faced the unknown and thrived. She had learned about different cultures and the resilience of the human spirit. Finally, she saw the familiar landscape of her home. As she stepped into her village, she was greeted with tears and embraces. Her family had been waiting for her. They listened, captivated, as she shared her stories. She was home. Section 11. A Changed Heart, Madam Tsang's Reflections and the Spirit of Adventure. Life returned to normal in Maotien, but Madam Tsang was changed. She carried the icy breath of the North within her. She shared her experiences with everyone. She spoke of the kindness of strangers and the beauty of the world. She had left in search of adventure. She had found something even more profound. She discovered the strength within herself. She learned that kindness and resilience could be found in the most unexpected places. Madam Tsang's journey taught her valuable lessons. It taught her that limits are self-imposed. It taught her that the greatest adventure is often stepping outside of one's comfort zone. It taught her about the importance of respecting different cultures and the natural world. Madam Tsang's icy adventure was complete, but her spirit of adventure continued to burn brightly. She knew that the world was vast and full of wonders, and she was determined to explore it one step at a time.